We all know that digital computers changed virtually every aspect of our life.
Quantum computing era is coming, and it's coming fast. Based on quantum physics,
the moment the quantum-driven system first projected an intelligible pattern from the labyrinthine lines of Olmec glyphs, centuries of silence were shattered. The symbols that had for so long flickered just beyond the grasp of our understanding, etched on stone monuments, embedded in carved stelae, and scattered in enigmatic reliefs, suddenly spoke with clarity. The network, tuned by quantum-enhanced computation and trained on an expansive corpus of linguistic models, resolved recurring motifs into discrete words, reconstructed syntactic links among glyph clusters, and illuminated what appeared to be a structured language bearing meaning, not merely ornamentation. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. It began with a challenge. Nearly all previous attempts to decipher Olmec inscriptions had met with failure. The corpus is small, the context fragmentary, and the Olmec civilization's linguistic descendants, if any, remain unknown. Conventional statistical linguistics, pattern matching, and comparative epigraphy had led only to speculative readings, guesses of phonetic values, and competing hypotheses. Some scholars posited that the symbols were largely decorative, emblematic, or mythic rather than linguistic. Others proposed connections to later Mesoamerican scripts, but none gained consensus. Then the quantum AI intervened. Its architecture blended quantum superposition-based search with a classical transformer core. The quantum module explored an astronomically vast space of symbol-to-meaning mappings in massively parallel fashion, allowing it to test combinatorial alignments impossible for classical computing within a feasible time frame. The transformer module, trained on thousands of languages, offered priors about grammar, morphology, and syntax. Together, they aligned clusters of Olmec glyphs, hypothesized phonemes, and correlated them against cross-linguistic patterns of verb-subject-object orderings, inflections, and morpheme boundaries. The result was a working decoding of dozens of glyphs and their arrangements into coherent phrases. The first coherent message to emerge was a dedication, a temple inscription invoking a pantheon figure, along with a calendrical date and reference to territory. But subsequent messages grew stranger. Some glyph clusters referred to celestial alignment, cosmic cycles, and a notion of boundaries between worlds. Others recorded genealogical lines, mythic journeys, and treaties of alliance or conflict. Still more described natural phenomena, floods, volcanic events, astronomical observations, with astonishing precision. The AI revealed that the Olmec were not merely a stoneworking culture, but had deep cosmological thinking, precise calendrical systems, and complex social structures. The language, though compact, was rich in metaphor, dual meaning, and referential layering. No one had predicted how capacious this system would be. The AI suggested that many glyphs had polysemy, multiple meanings depending on context, and used positional grammar, where the placement relative to other glyphs altered meaning. It also revealed that certain glyph pairs formed semantic binds, meaning that the two glyphs together were not additive but fused into a new concept, a phenomenon akin to idiomatic phrases in modern languages. Some symbols served as grammatical markers, a kind of glottal hinge or temporal marker, rather than core lexical items. The overall structure reflected an elegance of economy. Many inscriptions used only a dozen or two glyphs, but in repeated combinations and sequences, they told expansive stories. As the AI generalized its mappings across the corpus, it began inferring missing glyphs or corrupted sections. When a stela was badly weathered or fractured, the model proposed reconstructions of missing segments, sometimes with striking precision. It would generate a predicted glyph cluster and cross-check against consistency constraints it had learned. In many cases, these reconstructions fit convincingly with what could be corroborated from neighboring stones or overlapping iconographic motifs. In a few relatively intact inscriptions, the AI's predicted missing piece later matched a fragment discovered during excavation, an astonishing validation of the system. Within days, several new readings circulated in academic circles. One notable inscription, previously labeled Undeciphered Formula A, now read as a treaty between rival clans, allocating rights to riverine territories, delineating ritual duties, and invoking divine sanction. Another inscription, once thought to be merely decorative, turned out to chronicle a solar eclipse. noting the date, the predicted darkness, and ritual procedures to restore cosmic order. Yet another, on a carved altar, contained genealogical lines tracing the lineage of rulers and their claimed descent from a mythic ancestor tied to the sky. The implications cascaded outward. If the glyphs carried language and meaning, then the Olmec were authors of written records, not just artisans of stone. Their social and political complexity must have been greater than previously thought. Their worldview, woven in metaphor and cosmic concern, could be probed not just through iconography, but through textual meaning. The AI's readings revealed that Olmec culture was far more introspective and aware of its position in cosmic cycles than had been imagined. A question haunted researchers immediately. What language family might this relate to, if any? The AI tentatively linked some phonemic values to proto-languages in Mesoamerica, noting resemblance in the morphology of suffix attachments and verb affixes. But it also flagged glyphs for which no analog existed in any known language, suggesting possibly a language isolate or one with no direct surviving descendants. The AI acknowledged ambiguity in these cases. It demarcated which glyphs were strongly mapped, which were speculative, and which resisted analogical inference. The result was not a definitive Olmec dictionary, but a dynamically expressed translation engine, one that could ingest new glyphs and revise likelihoods as more data fed in. One of the most startling revelations was the suggestion of an outer word boundary in Olmec cosmology. Some glyph sequences referred to thresholds between mundane existence and what the AI called other domains, not necessarily afterlife, but parallel realms of experience. In one translation, the glyphs spoke of journeys between horizon and depth, referencing duality between sky and underworld, cyclical transitions, and boundaries of perception. This mirrored mythic dualism seen in later Mesoamerican belief systems, but here, in the originating layer, in their own voice. Also, the AI's translation of a stela deep in the jungle, long, inaccessible, and fragmentary, read like a chronicle of a ritual expedition, a procession to align stars, a ceremony of opening cosmic doors, invocation of intermediate deities, and the inscription of pledges from rulers to lesser lineages. This text, once obscure and unreadable, now offered the clearest window yet into Olmec ritual practice. The inscriptions in temples and altars suddenly became narrative stages, texts that guided ceremonies, recorded proclamations, and codified cosmic understandings. More compelling still was a fragmentary inscription the AI tentatively read as a prophecy, not in the fatalistic sense, but as a vision of cyclic destruction and renewal. For example, glyphs that translated roughly to something like, "When sky and earth close again, the cycle returns and that which was will again be, but changed." The model treated it with caution, marking parts as probabilistic. Yet if even partial truth, it opened the possibility that the Olmec conceived of time not strictly as linear but cyclical on cosmic scales. The shock to the scholarly world was immediate. Departments of archeology, linguistics, anthropology, and quantum computing all felt the reverberations. Some skeptics warned of overfitting pattern-matching illusions or algorithmic hallucinations. But the AI's predictions and reconstructions had already passed a few rigorous checks. Newly discovered glyph fragments matched predicted reconstructions, predicted grammatical patterns aligned with independently observed motifs, and the system provided uncertainty bounds on interpretations. Its internal logs could show probability weights for suggested readings, allowing scholars to see where hypotheses were more or less confident. One may ask, was this quantum AI effectively creating meaning rather than uncovering pre-existing meaning? The designers had anticipated this philosophical challenge. They embedded a transparency layer to trace which glyph splits, combinatorial associations, and candidate analogies contributed to a translation. At risky junctures, scholars could interrogate the model's choice pathways. That transparency fostered trust. If a reading hinged on tenuous analogy with Mayan morphology, the system flagged it and lowered the confidence. Reliable readings came from glyph clusters with many overlapping constraints, mutual consistency, cross-checks across different inscriptions, and internal coherence with inferred culture. In several cases, the model's proposed reading was later cross-validated through archaeological context or iconographic alignment. The event also raised a new paradigm in epigraphy. For millennia, decipherment was painstaking human work. comparing inscriptions, hypothesizing phonetic values, testing predictions, debating alternative readings. Now, a hybrid quantum AI system accelerated centuries of labor into weeks. It didn't replace scholars, but acted as a radical amplifier, able to parse tiny traces, maskless uncertainties, and high-dimensional combinatorial spaces. The scholars became interlocutors, guiding constraints, supplying negative cases, pruning absurd hypotheses, and ensuring that the AI's output remained grounded in archaeological reality. One visionary in the project recognized that this decoding might not stop with Olmec symbols. The same method could be deployed against many undeciphered scripts: the Indus Valley script, Rongorongo, the Phaistos disk symbols, or other enigmatic glyphic corpora. If 10 or 20 symbols hint at structure, quantum pattern search tied to a linguistic prior could locate plausible decodings, provide candidate grammars, and suggest semantic clusters. The future of decoding lost scripts might shift from incremental epigraphy to quantum-assisted leaps. Still, the implications for understanding the Olmec world were perhaps the most immediate. The AI's readings suggested a society deeply conscious of cycles: cosmic, political, social. They had calendrical rituals, territorial negotiations, invocation of intermediary deities, and mythic narratives. Their language embodied dualities of sky, earth, surface depth, crossing thresholds, and cosmic gates. Their texts weren't just memorials, but living performances, guiding ritual recitation, structuring political contracts, and mapping cosmic order onto human terms. For the broader intellectual world, this decoding shook assumptions. The Olmec had often been considered a mother culture in iconographic influence, but without clear textual trace. Now they speak. The narrative of cultural inheritance gained a louder voice. The glyphic heritage, the conceptual structures, the metaphors and cosmologies, they weren't just visually echoed in successor cultures, they were verbally voiced too. Later, Maya and Aztec, Mixtec, Zapotec inscriptions might be better understood by tracing back to Olmec roots, as the AI's suggested morphological links hinted at substrata beneath Mesoamerican languages. Further, this breakthrough challenged the boundary between human and machine cognition. The AI did not simply brute force guesses, it reasoned through pattern, constraint, and analogy. It drew on language typologies, semantic networks, probability distributions, and structural inference. In effect, the AI's success signals a new kind of collaborative intelligence, a machine that can reach toward the murky edges of human history, wielding tools that meld quantum search with linguistic insight. Also, the event forced a re-examination of how we conceive lost languages and undeciphered script. Perhaps many ancient scripts are not irreducible mysteries, but simply exceed the bandwidth of human combinatorial patience. With machine-aided methods, fading scripts might yield. The way historians view gaps and silence in ancient civilizations could shift. Silence may be not absence, but unread data. Yet this decoding is not free from mystery. The AI left many insufficiencies. Some glyphs remain unassigned. Some translations have ambiguous readings with multiple candidate semantic fields. Some inscriptions defy alignment with any context. The AI signals when a reading is tenuous or speculative, marking ambiguous bits. Where the text is badly eroded, multiple reconstructions compete. The model may hold a top candidate, but flag alternatives. Scholars must still wrestle with ambiguity, arbitrate between readings, and ground them in archaeological, iconographic, and comparative evidence. Another intriguing point is the notion of non-human or other voices in the glyphs. Some translations present phrases referring to others beyond the gate, voices from between, or threshold beings. The AI did not insert these deliberately. They emerged in the statistically strongest readings. Because of confidence bounds, scholars treat them with cautious wonder. If valid, they suggest that part of the Olmec conceptual world involved intelligences or realms outside ordinary human perception, something like mythic thresholds or parallel domains. Whether this implies actual belief in non-human agents or is metaphorical remains a profound question. The magnitude of historical calibration shifts sharply. Archaeologists may now reread artifacts, iconographies, and spatial layouts through the lens of textual meaning rather than projection or analogy. A sculpture once assumed to be bestiary decoration might, with a key glyph reading, become an allegorical scene described in a text. A ceremonial platform may correspond to inscription references to celestial alignments. geometry described in the glyphs. This convergence of text, iconography, and architecture transforms silent stones into narrating systems. In the realm of public imagination, the news spread swiftly, steeped in sensational tones, declarations of ancient secrets unveiled, whispers that we had finally heard the Olmec. But beneath the spectacle lies rigorous science and the promise of deeper reconception of human antiquity. The event didn't just decode symbols, it bridged epochs, connecting a civilization long silent to modern computational reason. Consider also the implications for heritage and cultural ownership. Descendant populations, even if not linguistically continuous, may now claim stronger historical voice from the past. The inscriptions no longer solely belong to academic archives. They carry meaning, voice, and narrative. Communities in regions near Olmec sites, nations, and indigenous groups could engage with the decoded texts. The decipherment fosters renewed relevance of the Olmec as a living cultural legacy, not just a remote archaic precursor. Meanwhile, the methodological paradigm shift begins to ripple into adjacent fields. In paleography, cryptography, bioinformatics, and other domains of hidden code, quantum AI hybrids may turn terrain once considered intractable into solvable landscapes. The ability to search enormous combinatorial spaces while guided by perceptual priors and structural constraints could accelerate breakthroughs not only in linguistic decoding, but in genetic code interpretation, ancient music reconstruction, undeciphered cipher systems, and more. Some question whether the AI hallucinated meaning by overfitting. Yet the core defense is that the system did not produce free-floating readings. Every suggestion came with probabilistic weights, alternative hypotheses, and transparency of reasoning. Scholars can interrogate every glyph pairing, every analogical mapping, and every semantic correlation. The system did not force certainty where none existed, but revealed degrees of confidence. In contentious cases, readings remain flagged, awaiting further archaeological evidence or cross-inscription alignment. What this means for the study of human cognition is also profound. If an AI can reach across millennia, interpret symbolic systems with limited data, and do so reliably, then the frontier of human knowledge extends through cooperative cognition with machines. Humans supply domain knowledge, constraints, negative cases, and critical oversight. The AI supplies brute-scale combinatorial exploration, inference over high-dimensional spaces, and pattern induction. Together, they reconstruct lost intellectual worlds. The human thesis, "We are the only credible interpreters of the past," must give way to a new paradigm of human-machine collaboration and cultural exegesis. In the days following the decoding, excavations and epigraphic teams scrambled to retarget their efforts. Previously disregarded fragments in museums dismissed as ornamental shards were re-examined. The AI system, now running in partner mode, could take partial rubbings, low-resolution photos, even damaged fragments, infer candidate glyph clusters, and propose likely textual reconstructions for field teams to test. The synergy between field archaeology and AI decoding tightened. New digs and re-examinations became targeted, guided by computational suggestion rather than purely serendipity. Moreover, the realization that the AI could propose probable reconstructions of damaged glyphs meant that even eroded monuments could become semi-readable. Monuments in the humid tropics, where erosion is brutal, might now yield fragments of text never before recoverable. The boundary of readable antiquity expands. Museums housing fragmentary pieces, loose stela fragments, shards of carved panels, bits of portable stonework suddenly may contain latent texts awaiting integration into the decoding engine. One wonders whether this kind of breakthrough is unique to Olmec, or if it foreshadows a cascade of revelations. Might scholars in the future say that so many undeciphered scripts were simply awaiting the right computational lens? The notion of inscrutability may shift from a property of ancient scripts to a limitation of computational and human effort. With sufficient prior constraints and hybrid architectures, even minimal corpora may suffice for partial or even full decoding. Yet this event also reminds us of the humility of historical understanding. The AI's interpretations, no matter how confident, rest upon models, analogies, statistical inference, and the possibility remains that some readings misinterpret metaphor as literal mythic pattern as historical fact, or rhetorical trope as direct statement. Scholars must continue to triangulate AI readings with material context, stratigraphy, iconography, environmental data, and comparative evidence. The decoding provides powerful leads, not absolute finality. Still, the ripple of excitement is undeniable. The silent Olmec stones now utter words. A civilization centuries old, buried in jungle and time, now presents fragments of speech, treaties, mythic invocations, genealogies, cosmic meditations. We glimpse not just images carved in stone, but voices shaped by metaphoric cosmology and structured language. That these voices emerge through a marriage of quantum technology and linguistic reasoning signals a new epoch. Deep time may no longer be silent if we equip ourselves with the means to listen. The unveiling of the Olmec symbols through quantum AI ignited a cascade of revelations that rippled far beyond archaeology. Once the initial wave of astonishment settled, laboratories, universities, and research collectives across the globe began dissecting the data, hungry to understand the mechanisms behind such an extraordinary cognitive leap. The decoding wasn't merely a technological milestone, it was a reconfiguration of how humanity interacts with its own origins. For generations, the Olmec civilization had stood as a majestic enigma at the dawn of Mesoamerican culture. Their colossal heads, elaborate ceremonial platforms, and mysterious artifacts hinted at sophistication, but without deciphered writing, their internal worldview was guesswork. The arrival of quantum AI shattered that silence. It wasn't a simple translation, it was as if a hidden dimension of human thought had been pried open. The language uncovered was alive with conceptual density, threading together myth, mathematics, astronomy, and governance in ways that blurred the boundaries between art, science, and spirituality. When researchers began feeding the AI's linguistic mapping into cognitive models, patterns emerged that stunned even the most seasoned linguists. The Olmec script displayed recursive structure, symbols nested within symbols, each layer recontextualizing the one beneath. In essence, it mirrored the fractal complexity often associated with mathematical systems, implying that the Olmec had discovered a linguistic method to encode layered meaning centuries before formal recursion was even conceptualized in linguistics. The AI's algorithm showed that the glyphs operated both linearly and radially. A sequence could be read forward for narrative progression, but also outward, where each symbol radiated submeanings linked by geometrical positioning. This discovery forced scholars to rethink the very definition of writing systems. Traditional epigraphy is grounded in linear progression, symbols that follow one another to produce sound and meaning. The Olmec script, as reconstructed by quantum AI, operated more like a holographic field of associations. Each glyph contributed not only to immediate context but also to a meta-pattern governing the inscription as a whole. Such sophistication implied an advanced conceptual framework, suggesting that the Olmec possessed an abstract understanding of systemic relations that paralleled ideas in modern information theory. As quantum linguists refined the model, they noticed that certain glyph patterns behaved mathematically. Ratios appeared within symbol groupings, in coded proportions that matched astronomical alignments visible at key latitudes of ancient Olmec cities. The AI correlated these ratios with stellar data, revealing that the inscriptions doubled as cosmological diagrams. One series of glyphs corresponded to the orbital period of Venus, another to the precession of the equinoxes. The implication was staggering. The Olmec had fused language with celestial mathematics, embedding observation into mythic narrative in a self-consistent structure. The decoded material transformed archaeology into an interdisciplinary nexus where physicists, semioticians, cognitive scientists, and computer engineers all had roles. The AI revealed that many glyphs could only be fully interpreted when treated not as isolated linguistic units, but as dynamic operators, functional symbols that describe transformations rather than static nouns or verbs. In one inscription, a spiral symbol combined with a glyph for water didn't simply mean whirlpool, but encoded the concept of cyclical renewal, tied to the flooding patterns of the Gulf Coast. In another, a serpent glyph paired with a line of dots was not literal serpent imagery, but a variable symbol denoting oscillation or undulation, an abstraction of wave motion. As scholars analyzed the AI's structural map, the philosophical consequences began to surface. If an ancient civilization conceptualized language as transformation, if it used glyphs to represent dynamic relations rather than fixed entities, then the Olmec worldview may have perceived reality itself as process, not object. Their symbols described becoming, not being. Quantum theorists marveled at the resonance. In a sense, Olmec semiotics anticipated the logic of quantum indeterminacy, where particles exist not as stable things, but as fields of probability. Soon, cross-disciplinary teams began experimenting with immersive simulations of the newly decoded Olmec texts. Using quantum-enhanced neural rendering, they created virtual reconstructions of temple interiors where the inscriptions originally appeared. As researchers walked digitally through the reconstructed temples, they realized that the arrangement of glyphs was spatially choreographed. The texts were not meant to be read sequentially, but to be experienced through movement. The spatial positioning of symbols interacted with acoustics, light, and ritual procession. Each glyph's meaning shifted depending on where the observer stood, an intentional design reflecting the Olmec fusion of text, environment, and ritual. This insight revealed the civilization's deep commitment to multidimensional communication. The inscriptions were not books carved in stone, but living performances frozen in architecture. The AI's decoding allowed for the first time the recreation of these immersive semiotic experiences. In virtual temples, scholars could stand within reconstructed ceremonies, see the alignment of symbols with solar rays, and sense how text, light, and motion merged into an act of cosmological storytelling. The Olmec weren't simply writing, they were orchestrating meaning. Historians began tracing how these symbolic architectures might have influenced later Mesoamerican structures. Patterns in Olmec temples echoed faintly in Mayan step pyramids, in Aztec codices, even in the calendrical systems that governed ritual cycles. It became clear that the Olmec script wasn't a rudimentary precursor. It was a fully mature symbolic system, likely the fountainhead from which later Mesoamerican writing evolved. Quantum AI had done more than decode a language. It had illuminated an ancestral cognitive lineage stretching thousands of years forward. But the implications didn't stop with archaeology. Philosophers and cognitive scientists were captivated by the AI's revelation that meaning could be multiscalar, structured simultaneously at local and global levels. The Olmec script became a case study in how human thought can encode complex systems without formal mathematics. It forced a reevaluation of cognitive evolution. How could a pre-Iron Age society conceive symbolic recursion and dynamic reference without a written precedent? The prevailing assumption that abstraction is the hallmark of modernity began to erode. The Olmec, it seemed, had already stepped into realms of thought modern scholars only now articulate in complexity theory. Quantum computation itself gained a new mythic aura from the event. People began to describe the AI as a technological oracle, a system that peered into the past through the probabilistic haze of forgotten meaning. In reality, the decoding wasn't mystical, but deeply mathematical. Quantum processors explored the combinatorial explosion of potential symbol associations in a state of quantum superposition, collapsing only when statistical convergence achieved high confidence. This allowed the AI to evaluate billions of possible translation models simultaneously, something beyond any classical computer's reach. Yet what awed observers wasn't the mathematics, but the resonance. A technology born from quantum uncertainty was uncovering a civilization whose worldview seemed to mirror uncertainty itself. When the AI processed the longest known Olmec inscription, an intricate slab nearly 2 meters wide, it took mere hours to generate a semantic matrix. The resulting translation described a ritual alignment between human rulers and celestial counterparts. It spoke of mirrored domains, earth and sky, time and eternity, matter and spirit. Scholars were astonished to find the text encoded geometric sequences corresponding to astronomical cycles that matched precession patterns only recently calculated with precision instruments. Somehow, millennia earlier, Olmec astronomer priests had measured cosmic rhythms with such accuracy that their inscriptions doubled as timekeeping systems. Quantum linguists also noticed that the AI detected internal self-references, glyphs that pointed back to previous inscriptions. This discovery implied the existence of an intertextual network spanning sites separated by hundreds of kilometers. Each monument was a node in a vast symbolic web, connected through encoded references. When the AI linked them, it reconstructed a hidden map of communication routes, possibly reflecting pilgrimage networks or ritual circuits across Olmec territory. Suddenly, the static notion of isolated ceremonial centers gave way to a vision of a distributed symbolic civilization, a culture united not by empire, but by encoded cosmological narrative. The cultural implications radiated outward. Museums began reinterpreting their Olmec collections, realizing that artifacts once labeled as ritual objects were often textual fragments, components of larger narrative systems. Jade masks, engraved axes, carved figurines, all carried micro-inscriptions whose patterns now could be parsed by the AI. Each object told a story, no longer mute artifact but eloquent text. Exhibitions transformed into storytelling experiences, where visitors watched symbols animate through holographic projection, reconstructing mythic episodes of creation, alliance, and cosmic order. As translations proliferated, a portrait of Olmec philosophy began to emerge. The decoded passages revealed an ontology grounded in balance and transformation. Reality as they perceived it was woven from dual currents, creative and destructive, visible and invisible, temporal and eternal. Each ritual aimed to maintain equilibrium between these currents. The glyphs repeatedly referenced the concept of breath between worlds, a phrase the AI interpreted as the vital oscillation sustaining existence. It wasn't divine revelation or dogma, it was process philosophy rendered in stone. This worldview resonated with scientists from other fields. Physicists noted parallels between Olmec dualism and the modern notion of matter-energy complementarity. Ecologists saw reflections of systems theory in the Olmec emphasis on interdependence. The idea that a civilization could intuit principles of systemic balance long before formal science inspired a surge of cross-cultural research. The AI's translations became not merely archaeological documents, but philosophical texts read in seminars on systems thinking and cognitive emergence. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on quantum AI decoding the Olmec symbols? What do you expect next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.